Hi everybody, this is the Sitecore XM Cloud Developer Certification Crash Course. I recently cleared the certification, so I thought I would share my learnings as part of the preparation process. So let's get started with the course. Let's give it some time to start. Yeah, okay. So before starting with anything with this material, I just wanted to share that the Sitecore e-learning platform, which has a study guide, that is the actual source of truth. And what I've got is some of the key points here. So it's more of a supplementary what you have here, and the actual e-learning guide, which is part of the e-learning platform, which I have shared in some of the PPTs. As we go through these PPTs, we will see that URL. You can see there a study guide, and I would advise you to go through all those links there, but also use this as a final prep before going to the exam. So first, before getting onto the course, let's see what is part of the XM Developer Certification exam about it, what is the duration and all that. So with anything practical, passing this exam doesn't guarantee you are an expert in this area. It's just to certify that you have XM Cloud basics intact. So yeah, so most of the content in this exam is more of a wordplay. So you should be good at words, understanding the sentences and answering. But if you get hands-on, once you get hands-on to the XM Cloud instance, do things practically, you are a lot more better. But now with this course or with this certification, what you are certified is you're good at basics. You understand what is an organization. You understand what is an organization admin, what is an organization owner, who is an organization user. So all those details. So this is just to familiarize you with all those aspects. And it's an exam which is easy for anyone who has done the Sitecore 10 developer exam, because I felt that a few questions were, especially something related to content serialization, they were taken from there. But you have also need to be good at XM Cloud concepts also, obviously, right? Because this is a XM Cloud exam. So obviously you need to be good at some of the competencies. So we'll see what are those competencies as we go. The cost of this exam is $350 USD, obviously. And if you have discounts or coupon with your organization, just check and use that while you register for the web assessor for the exam. This is online proctored. If you want, you can go to a center and write it. But I chose to write it at my home, online proctored. So I registered. In fact, I booked the exam just when I was ready, and I took it just in an hour's time. So it's so easy as it is compared to good old days where you have to wait for a week or something to get a slot and things like that. So the day prior to exam date, go to Criterion Web Assessor. So you go to webassessor.com, and then you need to check your prerequisites, because it's long time since I wrote an exam. So and it was a new computer, so I had to check all the things are there. Like for example, your audio, video, all that is working fine. In fact, I didn't have a standalone camera, so I had to buy that. So that was a good chance. So just before the exam, have everything ready, test everything, go for the exam, and keep your desk and surroundings free of clutter, like all web assessor exams that you take from home. I had this scenario where there was this invigilator who was asking me to show my specs. If something is there inside my specs, I'm hiding something and all that. So just be prepared for that. And most importantly, just keep your desk clean. Don't have any newspapers on top of it or things like that, simple things. So keep it clean, just a laptop and a camera in the side, which shows your hands and your eyes, and they can see you all the time. And that's it. Nothing much serious. Remove any sticky notes or papers on the wall, but I don't think that's really important unless you write something Sitecore or notes there. I have my walls with my kids' pay drawings and all that. I don't think anybody is so mad to asking me to remove that. So nobody did that. So that's a good thing. You need a webcam, as I said. That should be an external one. Your front or rear camera on the computer will not do. No external disturbance during exam, just for yourself and for the people who are invigilating you also, right? So there should be no external disturbance. Take up a time which is free for you. Kids have gone to school, everybody's out, and you're just sitting in one room, in a corner place which is surrounded by as much walls. and take the exam from there. That's it. Apart from that, on the exam date, just be 15 minutes early. So the launch button will appear if you have taken the Sitecore 10 exam. There's a launch button that appears about 10 minutes earlier than the exam schedule time. Yeah, so that's something you need to keep looking, refreshing the page, and then the plugin runs once, and then you're good to go. It's as simple as that. Gets the exam plugin gets launched, and you have details about the exam, the duration, and all this, accepting all this agreements, and then go for the exam. At any point in the exam, you can be intervened by the invigilator, and the exam will be paused during that time. Yeah, very well known. So I also found that the criterion helpline number has changed, and I was lucky to find out. I went to their website, and that slightly they have changed the way you can get their number, because just before taking the exam, I had a blip in my internet. Yeah, I was wondering what would happen if it happened in the middle of the exam. Obviously, we need this number, right? So go to the site. So you have this chat, and you can select your country, and you can find the number, and you can call them. So that's something just be aware of, or keep it separately before the exam, and so that you can call if at all there's a need, if there's an internet cut or power cut and things like that. So let's get started with the actual stuff. So exam competencies, you have 8 competencies. So the first two are more in line with exam cloud. And then the third one is more about renderings and layout, which is more from the coding point of view, Sitecore point of view. Then obviously the most favorite topic, the content serialization, that's there. And then you have some questions about Sitecore APIs and webhooks. Then generally about web XM Cloud pages, XM Cloud components. Although components in still early in early access, yeah, you slightly tested in that area. Then security for developers. The security for developers is very much similar to our Sitecore 10 certification, where they talk about access viewer, security editor, and then you have the security editor and content editor also, right? That's a security pen. So you're tested in those areas. What are the, how are they used? How are they useful for you? Things like that. And then data modeling, which is again area from Sitecore 10, Sitecore certification, where they ask questions about data template, insert options, standard values, which is our favorite area, and we can score more there. So the last two topics, the 7, 8 is something you can score 100%, but yeah, just keep it open, prepare for all areas, because the split up is very, it's not like 10%. Obviously the 10% each comes up to 80%, right? So some areas have more weightage than others. Let's see that in the next few slides. Okay, so these are the competency areas you can see there on the left, and I split it up because the exam is 50 questions, right? So total of 50 questions. So you have competency 1, which has 6 questions, because 12% of questions are from competency 1, 16% of question, which is 8 questions in competency 2. Then competency 3 has 7, which is 14%. Competency 4 also 14%, 7 questions. Competency 5 questions, which is 10%. So yeah, you can see the other ones, right? Competency 6 is 5 again, 5 questions. So competency 7 is 5 questions. Competency 8 is 7 questions, and total is 50 questions. So that's the weightage. The good thing is, if you can see the data modeling, which is our template, standard values, and all that stuff, it has more weightage. It has 7 questions, so you should be excited about that. And if you're good, like obviously because we are preparing the XM Cloud certification, right? We'll be concentrating more on the XM Cloud areas. In my case, I could score about 100% of the competency 2. So if you're lucky, you could get some easy questions there, and you can score in other areas also. But my competency 1 was really bad. It was just 66%. So I got about 4 questions right for 6, which is not really bad. But then, yeah, you have to aim for more than 80% in all areas to be there in the comfortably in that 80% mark. So yeah, just keep an eye for that and prepare all areas really well. So it's a 100-minute exam. So 1 hour 40 minutes, no breaks. You are not supposed to drink water also. Like I sipped some water, and the invigilator said, "What are you drinking? You're not supposed to drink." Okay, fine. Yeah, so that's something you should be aware of, and you should always keep looking at the monitor all through the exam. You should not be looking up or something like that. You should close your eyes and think. That's what they told me. So that's some interesting observations and interesting suggestions for me from the other side. So good to be aware of that. Um, the next one, next slide is about again what we covered, right? 8 test areas, 50 questions, 100 minutes duration, 1 hour 40 minutes. So multiple choice questions, and you can mark a question for review and return anytime before submitting. Yeah, this is something we have known if you have taken the other exams. Result is available on screen as soon as you submit the exam. That's a very good thing. Most questions have 4 answer options, except a few having more than 4 options. Some areas have more weightage than others. Some competencies have more weightage. We have seen that. Pass percentage is 80. No negative markings, which is something we know. So it is a basic exam to test XM Cloud concepts, terms. You should thorough the XM Cloud documentation. But I've seen some areas where the URL or the links that they have provided is not enough, and you have to dig deeper and go through videos, and sometimes you might not be even able to get material for that, but you just try to prepare as much, right? So we can do only as much. So do it as much and concentrate on the areas that where the study guide is giving you reference. Do that well, and you should be able to pass if you're thorough in those areas. Questions could delve into general Sitecore concepts like CLI, security templates. Yeah. No code-based questions. Yes, obviously you'll have 1 or 2 questions on providing a GraphQL query and asking you to find out what does that query do, which is basic according to this exam. So yeah, that's something which will mostly come out of the documentation. Like they won't ask you some outrageous queries. Most of these queries are examples in the documentation. So be thorough with, just search for query examples in the XM Cloud documentation page. Whatever you see there, just go through all that. Keep yourself ready. It's not so tough. It should be very easy. If you go through it once, you will catch it. In multiple correct answers, all options could be correct. But I'll be frank with you. There are 4 options. I have seen that only 3 are right, and the one of them will be definitely wrong. So go by the law of averages, but don't go only by that. Okay, so just wanted to highlight that. It could be, but most of the times it's like 3 options are right. Maximum 3 options will be right. That there will be one, that black sheep, which we have to spot out, but keep your options open. Don't select all options unless you are sure, since exam evaluator might see only the correct combination. So that's something which we have covered. So you can see the URL below. This is the URL. You will go and find the study guide. So check that. It's a nice guide with URLs and competencies and what topics are covered in each of the competency. We will do that even in our slides. Like when we go to each of the competencies, I've also written how many questions are there separately, and then what topics are covered or what are the URLs provided in the study guide. So as far as I see, the exam preparation duration is about 30 to 40 hours. So spend about 2 weekends or maybe 3 weekends maximum. So learn it from the curriculum. Go through the Sitecore Discover videos. I have marked them, the videos, some of the videos. So you can go through those. You should go to the XM Cloud documentation, which is basic. Sitecore and security basics, Sitecore Discover videos, and CLI basics. So let's start with the competency 1, which is XM Cloud architecture and developer workflow. In this, we have these topics: define XM Cloud specific terminology, describe the benefits of cloud and SaaS architecture for composable DXP foundations, define key components within the developer workflow, and then manage sites with collections. The manage sites within site collection is one of the key areas. You probably would get at least 2 questions in that. And if you write the e-learning test, there's a mock exam in the end. And just be thorough with that, with those questions and answers, because even if you get 1 or 2 out of that, and if you miss that in the actual exam, it obviously makes a lot of difference, right? So be aware of that and be careful when you take the exam. So prepare well, ensure that you are really good at the mock exam, which is part of the study guide. So that's important thing. I've added those URLs for each of those, but especially in case of the competency 1, I felt the material probably was not enough for me, but do as much as I already told. Just I did as much as I can by reading other things as much as I can. from these topics, and based on what is asked in the mock exam, I just covered as much. So that's what I did. So let's get started with some basic information. Why is XM Cloud? It reduce hosting complexity and cost, leverage new Sitecore features faster, because the XM Cloud is a centralized environment where Sitecore is managing it. So you don't need to worry about features and versions there. Utilize new features like Pages, Explorer, and Component Builder, which is the selling point, right? So you need to be good at, you need to understand the Pages, Explorer, and Component Builder, or new features in case of XM Cloud. So it gives you faster web experience. It's a subscription-based SaaS. So and then your automatic version upgrades, portal-based organization, access, user invitation. Yeah, so because it's SaaS, there should be an organization admin or a owner. Both of them mean the same. For the exam, there's an organization admin / owner. Both have them have the admin permission. Based on documentation, what is given about organization owner is they have all the privileges of an organization admin, but the only thing organization owner can do is create or provide access to other organization owners. That's what it says. But I've seen in real time, multiple organization admin also can be created. So that's something, you just keep it open. Like, think that for the exam, organization admin and owner are the same roles. The only different role is the organization user, which is another separate role, which is lower level compared to the admin / owner. So it has headless support. It is basically a Next.js, React.js compatible. DevOps integration, decoupled rather than monolithic model, integrated best of breed products, Docker based. When you set up it locally, it runs on Docker. Web-based component support, static site generation, front end as a service, SDK or service support, like Next.js SDK support, JS support, Edge CDN based deployment. So this is just an overview of the platform. Nothing covered in the exam as such, specifically in these areas. But if you have this idea, then you can relate to the other concepts very easily. So Sitecore XM Cloud has a portal, through which you manage access and things like that. So that's the URL, portal.sitecorecloud.io. As I told, an organization is part of Sitecore subscription. So Sitecore, somebody from Sitecore provides a invitation to a organization owner / admin, and they in turn invite other users. They can create users, they can assign permissions to them, and then they give access to different apps. The apps can be XM Cloud, Content Hub 1, CDP. In the Sitecore Cloud portal, you can assign the following app roles: user and admin. So organization user, organization admin is what generically called as user and admin, even in the documentation. So you have user on one side, then you have organization owner / row, organization owner / admin in the other side. Okay, so that's something you need to keep in mind. So next thing is XM Cloud access rights. So questions in this area could be something like a person is granted two roles. Okay, both of them deny access. One denies access, and the grants access to an item. So what prevails? So in case of item, the deny usually prevails. Okay, so that order I have written down. So default for item access right is deny. Okay, default for inheritance is allow. Deny prevails over allow for items. So this is only for items. Okay, and then user access overrules role access. So for example, grant access is given at the user level for an item, and the role to which this guy belongs is deny. So the grant access at the user level prevails on that item. But if you have inheritance in play, it's always allow stays above deny. So for items, it's deny. For inheritance, it's always allow. So for example, a role has allow, and user has deny. So the allow stays above the deny, irrespective of what is the role. So that's something you can get an idea when you go through the documentation and the diagrams, but yeah, there is a section here which talks about access sites, and there are few examples. So go through those examples and get an idea, and this list could be useful at that point. So then the most important thing is site collection, site structure, right? So you have uh, in SXA sites, you can create a site collection folder. Under site collection folder, you can site collection, and then you have a site folder. Under site folder, you have site. So you have scripts for deleting a site collection folder. You have script for PowerShell script for deleting a site collection, deleting a site folder, and deleting a site. So these are all PowerShell scripts you need to be aware of. So you can right click and in the Sitecore instance and delete in a SSX instance, use these options from the script menu. And generally this URL in the bottom has details about where each of that stacks, like you have a site collection folder and that's like a brand collection. And then you have a site collection which is similar to brand. Site folder is like region, Europe, Asia and all that. And then comes site, which is like Poland and things like that. So that example is provided in that particular URL. So form an idea about this, like there could be questions like um, a multi-brand site having different countries, how would the rendering host be created? If there are separate countries or separate languages, obviously they need to have a separate rendering host. So just get your head around it and form an idea in this area. So next, the different entities, when you talk about XM Cloud, you have a developer and an end user. You have a rendering host. The rendering host is what serves your um, cached, your HTML and CSS and the artifacts, and it goes through the CDN and reaches the end user. There is also a delivery API. Delivery API is GraphQL based, so you can reach to the edge schema through delivery API. And your published content goes to the experience edge from XM Cloud. So the repository provider, which is like GitHub, that is used to deploy your code to XM Cloud. The preview API is used when in the development scenario where which has the same schema as your delivery API, but you are using a development instance for development purpose. So the local instance talks to your preview API, so you don't need to touch the production environment or the experience edge. So that's really important. Um, so, and another look about the multi-site, site design deployment. So you have a rendering host, editing host. The editing host is more like your experience editor, where you have your design and you can have the content editor do editing. The rendering host is what gets served to the end user. Go through these URLs to get more details about each of these topics. So one of the important things that's stated in this particular area is the code first approach and the Sitecore first approach, which are development practices. So the code first approach, you can first need to install the CLI plugin. Then the packages get installed, then the JSS CLI is ready. Now you can create your template, and then you can start your JSS application, use the JSS start command. So this is a disconnected mode. It's not connected to your Sitecore side. You keep working in the client side, and then there is a manifest JSON. You work with the manifest JSON and then push the changes, deploy the changes to your Sitecore instance. I didn't see any specific questions about this connected mode or disconnected mode in the exam, but it's good to have an idea about this. Then the other one, there's the .env file, which is part of your client setup. There's a .env file. This is the order of precedence. The .env.local has the highest precedence if you have it in your local. If you have a .env and a .env.local, the .env.local values are taken. So this is also something I didn't see many questions in this area, but good to get an idea about these environment variables because I saw that's a part of the documentation. So some of the important points in the Sitecore Cloud portal, if a team member has an organization admin or organization owner role, they have an admin role in all XM Cloud apps in the organization. So organization admin / organization owner or admins. You cannot delete the user or remove their administrator role in XM Cloud. you must delete the user or remove their administrator role from the Sitecore cloud portal. So we have a URL for cloud portal, cloud application, and then there is a Sitecore cloud portal, right? So you can delete users only in the Sitecore cloud portal. This could be tested in the exam. Then just a random note: configure rendering data source location to restrict content editors to this or basic Sitecore concept. When you create a template, you have an item, you specify a data source, right? And then you specify the data source location so that the content editor picks up, is shown only one part of the tree and they pick it up from there. Although this is not part of competency one, we just randomly added it here. So every data source has a data source template, and you can specify the data source template so that only those templates are filtered for the specific content items. So that's something important in this area. And then to use XM Cloud Deploy app, you must have an organization admin or organization owner role in your Sitecore Cloud Portal organization. An organization admin or organization owner can grant a team member access to the XM Cloud Deploy app by changing their role. So to use XM Cloud Deploy, you must have an organization admin or organization owner role in your Sitecore Cloud Portal organization. So an admin or owner only can grant a team member such an access. To create a new XM Cloud project, you must be an organization admin or organization owner in an XM Cloud organization. So this is something very important. You can create an XM Cloud project only if you are an organization admin or organization owner. So organization user must be changed to one of these roles like admin or owner to be able to create XM Cloud project. In the experience editor, you can create placeholder restrictions on specific pages instead of all the pages that belong to a site. Again, this is not part of this competency, but I have added some random important points to show that there are other areas which are very important. Whenever I get an idea, I just add it here. So based on that, so in experience editor, when you have a placeholder restriction on specific pages instead of all the pages, you can create placeholder restriction on specific pages instead of all the pages that belong to a site. Similar to how you create a placeholder restriction that is applicable to most of the pages in the site under placeholder settings. So you can do in the experience editor, you can create placeholder restrictions on specific pages instead of all the pages that belong to the site. Do not allow components directly to page or add components directly to page designs. Page designs cannot hold the information on their own, but refer to the information stored in the partial designs. So if you add components directly to the page designs, they do not render on the page. So when we get to page designs, we'll understand what is a page design. There is a layout. So this is the hierarchy. So there is a layout under that. And then you can have a page design which has a specific layout. And then within the page design, you have partial designs, which is nothing but something like a header or a footer. And within that header or footer, you might have different renderings. So for SXA, this is a very important concept where you have a page design. You have to create a page design, and the page design is composed of partial designs. And obviously, the partial designs might have one or more renderings. This is mainly for reusability and then uniformity in the site. So that's where you have partial design, page design all coming into picture. In the publishing pipeline, dependencies are calculated at the item level. For example, you might change a data source item of a page in the navigation. Because the page is dependent on the data source item and is rendered by the navigation component, any page containing the navigation component has to be republished. We will see this in the later stage where you're talking about publishing and pipelines. This publishing is from the XM Cloud CM instance to Experience Edge. So because it sits separately, the Experience Edge, it's not a CD anymore, and it's not part of the monolithic architecture, and it sits separately. There's an Experience Edge connector that needs to publish from the CM instance to Experience Edge. So your content or the items have to go in bulk, and so the dependency is really important. So you have to calculate what are the items. I mean, the approach that's followed by the pipeline is like it calculates the dependencies and then finds what needs to be published based on what is already there in the Experience Edge instance, and then does the publish. So you have to be very careful when you do one item publish, because you might be leaving out another item which also needs to be published. So the documentation says that you have to make this publishing process as part of the workflow, rather than just randomly publishing items and leaving out others. In XM Cloud Pages, you can assign a template to a page design and also duplicate, rename data template, but data templates must be created in content editor. So this is something I searched in the documentation, and I was searching actually to find out whether I can create templates in XM Cloud Pages. That's when this came out. You can duplicate or rename data templates in XM Cloud Pages, but if you have to create a template, you have to go to your data template section in content editor. Competency 2, deployment of XM Cloud projects. So this is one of the key areas. This has most number of questions, 8 questions. So you can see the topics that are part of this, like how do you log into an XM Cloud deploy application? How do you create a project? How do you create an environment within a project? How do you deploy code to an environment? Things like that. So you need to get hold of the hierarchy and know how to connect to GitHub, because XM Cloud deploy app only supports GitHub. But if you want to use other code providers, then you have to use CLI or REST. So for deploying, you have 3 options now: CLI, the XM Cloud deploy app, then the REST APIs. So if at all you are not using GitHub as the provider, you have to choose CLI or REST. This also covers configure repositories environment, connect to your repository. So there's a separate section about how to connect from the deploy app to GitHub, providing permission to the deploy app and things like that. So that we'll check. Review project details to determine deployment status. So whenever deployment happens, there is a deploy log that gets created, deployment log. So those logs have information about the whole process. Like there is a provisioning part, build, deploy, then post actions. So these are all part of the flow when you pull a code from a source repository and then push it to XM Cloud instance. It follows this path of provisioning, build, deploy, and post build actions. So you need to be aware of these steps. So let's get started with the competency 2. So we have the structure here, right? So we talked about this briefly. When you provision your application XM Cloud, you have XM Cloud instance. Then an Edge connector and Edge also get created as part of your provisioning process. And then your Next.js code is part of the GitHub repository that needs to be deployed to something like Vercel or Netlify, which you called as the rendering host. And from there, your static site gets generated and it's sent to the browser, which is viewed by the end user. The editing host is useful for content editing. That's a separate side, and it's all these things are managed by Sitecore, the Edge, XM Cloud instance, build deployment services, and all that. But your Vercel is outside the scope of Sitecore, so that should be managed by developers in your team. So this slide gives you an idea of the CLI command. So we talked about 3 types of deployment. One is through the XM Cloud deploy app. The other one is Sitecore CLI. The third one is REST. Because the CLI is a separate section in the exam, it's good to have an idea of the process. Like you have at the top level organization, you invite users to the organization. Only organization admin or owner can create a project, and then you can create an environment, one or more environments within a project. Then you can initiate a deployment from your code repository to the environment, and then your XM Cloud instance is ready for that environment. So the commands are there, like you understand there is a .NET Sitecore Cloud login, which is for the interactive login. There is also a non-interactive login. You just get an idea basically about the structure of this command. First part is .NET, then comes Sitecore because we are doing some cloud. So it's cloud is the third one. Then comes the actual command login. So .NET Sitecore Cloud Project Create -name. So these, just be aware of these steps. There's not much tested about each of these commands, but then it's good to have an idea because these are basics for you. So tomorrow when you start working, you need to have an idea that there is a CLI plugin for cloud, which is available from 5.0 of CLI, and then you have to install that, then use these commands. You obviously need to have an XM Cloud instance. Somebody needs to invite you, and then you go and log in and create your project. So you need to be an admin so that you can create a project. So those are, just have a basic idea about that. So yeah. So XM Cloud project creation methods, deploy app, CLI, REST APIs. So project and environment interlink. Every project can have multiple environments, and each of these environment can have a deployment. So you can manage an environment using CLI or REST. Okay, so some of the things that could be tested in the exam is how do you link a branch to a particular environment? How do you make automatic commits do a deploy to the environment? So just be aware of how this is done. Go to the, like, go in the project, go to the environment. There'll be three dots, click it, and then go to the specific section where you have the branch, link it to a branch. Then there's also an option, a checkbox to checkbox or a drop down to specify whether this should be automatically triggered when there is a commit. So just be aware of this, that there is something like this in the portal or the XM Cloud deploy app. The cloud portal is totally different from deploy app. This is all part of the deploy app where you can access an environment and then change the branch and all that stuff. So just have an idea. So link an environment to a different branch is what I mean. So the deployment topology, we briefly talked about this. You have experience sets sitting between the actual users and the content management instance, XM Cloud content management instance. So if you have to push your templates, items from your XM Cloud instance to Experience Edge, then you do a publish. So there is a connector that's needed here, which gets provisioned, Experience Edge connector, which gets provisioned as part of your provisioning process. I have a slide about the whole process of provisioning, build, and deployment coming in few slides now. So that has details of what gets provisioned. So what gets provisioned is the Experience Edge initially, then the Experience Edge connector, then the content management instance. So this is a basic idea, like any content management instance has all these page layouts, data source configuration, etc., blah, blah. So that we are aware of based on our Sitecore experience. So this is for the XM Cloud. Most important part is the GraphQL. Then publishing happens from the XM Cloud instance to the Experience Edge through a connector, which sits between the CM instance and the Experience Edge. So let's go. This is my favorite slide because it covers a lot of important things when it comes to deploy app. So this is specifically XM Cloud deploy app. Okay, so this is more specific to GitHub connection because if GitHub is not there, we will be talking only about CLI. Whenever we talk about XM Cloud deploy app, it means the GitHub based one. So first you have a GitHub repository where you project creation. GitHub connection is also one more important part. How do you create a GitHub connection? That's how to help to allow XM Cloud deploy app to take your code, build it, and then push it to the CM instance. And that process is this: after it picks up your code, what does it do? It starts provisioning all the infrastructure, then builds the code, deploys your code, creates editing host, and then post actions like CLI push and all that, so that the same instance has your content. So that's part of this area. So there are some sections. You can see that in this post actions, this is a JSON. You have the rendering host section, CM warmup section, schema population, reindexing section, publishing, deployed SES module. So you have to understand that these are all placeholders. You have to write code if this has to work. But the starter template, there's something called a starter template, which is a boilerplate code. Um, it works on with a few clicks, and that one does this automatically. So it probably has a post build actions, because at the end of it you see some pages in the XM Cloud instance. But if you are creating your own code, then you have to, if it is in GitHub, then you have to ensure that you write your deploys SES modules also as part of the post actions. Now with deploy, you have the editing host created, XM Cloud instance, in the XM Cloud instance, then you have the Sitecore artifacts getting built, DB creation, index configuration, DB artifacts all gets done in this build process. And provisioning, in provisioning you have experience edge connector and experience edge. See, in the exam, don't be no, there could be situations where they say provisioning is happening. What all part of provisioning? And there could be an option which says experience edge, experience connector, and XM Cloud instance. Just see the closest option and pick it up. What you want might not be there, but you definitely know experience edge is created during provisioning. If experience edge connector is not there in the option list, but experience edge is there, and then CM instance is there, that's enough for you to pick up that option. So beware of that, rather than some random option which says experience edge, experience connector, experience edge connector, and Versal. Versal is more of a brand name, right? So this is an exam where you are talking about topics and concepts. So just be smart enough and pick such options. So we have the very famous topic of what is an editing host and rendering host. So I've tried to put that in the slide, where the editing host sits in the XM Cloud instance, rendering host is a CDN provider, which is Versal or Netlify. Yeah, just have a basic idea about this. There's nothing tested really about editing host or rendering host, but just have a basic idea about this. This is another important part where we are seeing how to allow XM Cloud app connect to GitHub through a GitHub connection. There are few variations, like you might need to provide access to all repositories if it is an XM Cloud app, because XM Cloud app will go and create that particular boilerplate code in your repository, in your own repository. So you should provide all access. Otherwise, the other option is pull that boilerplate code down, make it part of your repository, and give access only to your repository. So when you do that, even in the process, as if you're a Git organization member, so remember this is a Git organization member. This is not your XM Cloud organization member. Okay. And XM Cloud does not have an organization member. The role is called as XM Cloud or organization user. Okay. So this is a GitHub organization member. So when I deploy if you're a GitHub organization member that's using this deployer, then there will be a request sent to your GitHub organization owner. He has to approve. And that's when the repository gets created, is able to create a connection in the XM Cloud. Sorry, in the GitHub, right? In GitHub, the repository is getting created. Your deploy app code goes and sits here. So the account should be mainly of these types only: GitHub personal, GitHub organization, or GitHub personal, organization, or enterprise account. Only these types of account have the ability to work with deploy app. So, so that's something to keep in mind. So if you're a GitHub organization member, your request goes to an organization owner. They have to approve before the code can access your repository and put the deploy app code base inside your GitHub repository. So if you are a GitHub organization member, you must first authorize and request the Sitecore deploy GitHub app. Then a GitHub organization owner must approve, install, and authorize your request. If you only want to create projects from existing source code, you need to install and authorize the Sitecore deploy GitHub app for the repositories that contain your existing code, right? So if you want to create projects from the starter foundation, you need to install and authorize the Sitecore deploy GitHub app for all repositories. Note that you can limit the deploy app access to just the cloned repo. If you clone the starter foundation code manually, since it now is the repo similar to existing source code repo. So that's the main difference. So if you start a play code, if it follows the XM Cloud app, which is an automated approach, XM Cloud, the deploy app does the process for you. Otherwise, you can, if it is your own code or even treating the starter template code as your own, you have to pull it and then provide access, necessary access for GitHub and the deploy app. Creating a new GitHub connection. Install and authorize the Sitecore deploy GitHub app on your personal account, organization, or enterprise. These are the 3 accounts. One of these 3 accounts you must have. You cannot create new GitHub connection with an enterprise managed user account. So that's why I highlighted that as so much. You should be part of either personal account, organization, or enterprise, but other accounts like enterprise managed user account, it is not allowed to have a connection, Git connection. All GitHub repositories created by deploy app have private visibility. So that's an after effect. Like once it creates a repository, like even otherwise, the cloning we do when we fork, it becomes a privately visible repository, right? Something similar to that. So because it's an automated process, the deploy app ensures that the GitHub repository that's created in the end has private visibility. So again, one more look at publishing. So in the normal XMXP world, you have the CM instance, CD instance. The CD instance can be part of your same machine, same server, or different topology. In case of XM Cloud, CD is not there. You call it as Edge, and we don't even talk about web database. So it's like you have master database, and then you have Edge. And then the edge is contacted by multiple applications or devices through GraphQL API. So next, competency 3, renderings and layouts. So it covers these areas about component builder, how to set placeholder restrictions, how to create a SXA module, cloning and all that stuff. You have a clone script, right? So how do you optimally use the clone script to create a module and the code base or the data sources related to that particular component? Those could be tested in the exam. And then how do you create a rendering, data source location, templates, rendering parameters versus variants, cloner rendering, create and manage headless variants, configure item security properly for existing and future items. Some of these topics and the URLs, as I said, will not match that. There are a lot of interesting topics there on the top, and the URL might be having something totally different. Dig as much as you can from YouTube videos and things like that. Yeah. So you have, as we already talked about, how partial designs are useful. You have, like for example, if you have a page which has home page, there's a header partial design, main partial design, then you have footer partial design, and this whole thing is a page design which is part of home page design. So that's something this is used for reusability. So you can have a blog page which have the same structure, page design, and they can be reused. So content pages can have one page design and they can be used, reused. So there are page designs and partial designs, as we already talked. So page design gives you the structure and layout. Then the partial design is for reusability. So that's something we need to be aware. The most important part is how do you we have XM Cloud components, or it is also called as component builder. This component builder is used to build standalone components, or called as web components, which is a no code or a low code medium. So that is the key thing, one of the key selling areas of XM Cloud, where you have XM Cloud components, which goes hand in hand with XM Cloud pages. So this component builder has a lot of capabilities. One of those capabilities is to include external components. When you say external components, these components are not or just React components, which are React JavaScript code based, and then you have HTML. So you can register these and start using it. So that this shows the process for that. So you develop it locally, and then you have a package Sitecore FEAS client side, and then you import that package, and you have a register component for the FEAS, which is front end as a service. This is a line you have to add in your external component, and then you put that in the rendering host. You host it in rendering host in a rendering host like Vercel, and then that rendering host URL, now you set it up in your component builder in a setting, and then it's a good practice to link all the components like that, whatever components you have, using a FEAS dot link components, which is part of your index.html. But the main key thing is here you are using an external React component and making it work with your component builder. So that's what you need to keep in mind. So the most important part is import the FAS package and then register the component in the React code base. And then now you have a registered component, and this component is like other components now, native component. You can drag and drop in your block canvas. You put a block element and then you can add a component and things like that. Once you stage this component, it can be part of Sitecore pages, and the content author can pass input parameters for these registered components. And the you can preview these components in the component builder, but not in the Sitecore pages. And then this component is scoped to a project. Scoped to an project. Yeah, scoped to a project, not an environment. Scoped because project is at a higher level, so it's scoped to a project. So that's something you need to be aware of. So this is for. So just understand this, that component builder has the no code components, but in case if you want to bring your own component, which is a React component, then this is the approach. You have to register, you have to register the component, then host it somewhere so that your component builder has access, and then it becomes a registered component. And then you can preview that in the component builder, and then you can pass input parameter. The content author can pass input parameters and test it in the Sitecore pages. So that's something that's good to be aware of. Registered component is part of the components library, scope to a project, and can be used and reused within XM Cloud pages. The registered component can be previewed in the component builder. A content author uses the component in pages, can enter values for the defined input parameters. Okay. External components are previewed in a separate tab of the builder, which is nothing but your component builder, okay, and can't be previewed in pages, which indirectly means that the XM Cloud native components built through the component builder can be previewed in pages. So next competency, content serialization, favorite topic. So like what we have seen, we need to be aware of this serialization commands: push, pull, watch, serialize, watch. Then you need to be aware of the connect command, which is used to connect two different environments. And then you have a ref parameter, right? And then you don't need login, just pull from here, push to another environment, that kind of syncing, which is part of the connect command. But the serialize watch is really interesting. Like if you are a developer and you want to automatically pull changes, you create a template. Then if you add the ser watch command, it keeps watching for changes and then pulls your changes from the Sitecore instance. So that's nice as for a developer. Yeah, so those are few commands that you need to be aware of, and also about the config file, sitecore.config file. Yeah, sorry, sitecore.json. Sitecore.config is our patch file, right? But sitecore.config could be an option in your answers. So be careful before you select that, because sitecore.json is our default configuration file for content serialization. So just be aware of all the configuration files and JSON files that are there, the whole process. The next important topic, an interesting topic, and a very good feature of Sitecore pages is the ability to connect your local environment to Sitecore pages. Sitecore pages is nothing but your Sitecore XM Cloud pages. So you have a local instance which is running in Docker, which is called as XM Cloud cm.localhost. And if you want the pages to be accessing pages dot, what I mean here is XM Cloud pages, which is the URL pages.sitecorecloud.io. In this pages application, if you want to see your local application items or designs, then this is the approach. What you have to do is you have to create a key, like you have to open the pages.sitecorecloud.io URL, go to the local storage, create a key sitecore.pages.localxmcloud URL under pages, Sitecore pages. You have to create this under local storage and provide a value of xmcloud cm.localhost, which is nothing but your local instance URL. Then in the browser, second browser, you have to connect to your local instance, and that env file should point to your should have these environment variables, and they should point to the pages URL on the pages site. Remember that this is a standard standard URL, the pages.sitecorecloud.io, which it will point to your instance of Sitecore Cloud. But this could be anything different, right? If you change your env file and have something else, probably you need to be aware of that. But the most important part, this process is really important. The env file should have these environment variables and values pointing to pages. And then you have to have this key in your browser for pages.sitecore.io. In the local storage, you need to have this key and the value. So that's very important. So questions could be something like, it's not connecting. Your local instance is not visible in pages. What could be the possible reasons? So just be aware of what value should go where. In your browser, navigate to pages. So I'm just explaining the whole process. Open the developer tools console of your browser, find the local storage section in the local storage panel. Click the entry for pages.sitecorecloud.io to reveal the local storage entries. Create an entry. This entry should have a key, local XM Cloud URL. Don't get carried. Just be thorough with this key name and the value. So the key name should be correct. It should not have any typo errors. And then you have to have the following environment variables to pointing to the pages.sitecore.io instance. Refresh the pages.site. Once you do all this, refresh the pages.sitecorecloud.io browser, and you should be able to see your front-end application. So this is about the connect command, where you connect to XM Cloud environment and your local instance. Then you can pull content from items or content from one instance. Now you can point to other instance name and push it from your local. So that's the power of Sitecore connect command. So yeah, some basics, cloud login, which is for interactive login. Then connect command, details about that. We already know about ser pull, ser push, right? So pull is to serialize item, push is to again deserialize into a Sitecore instance. So just be aware of that. So project create. So again, let's recollect that. An organization can have a project can have an environment, multiple environments. Each environment will have a deployment, which is like code getting deployed to that environment. And then you have an XM Cloud instance. Let's go one step backward. You can do deployment using XM Cloud Deploy app, the CLI, or the REST. But XM Cloud Deploy app supports only GitHub. So these are some of the important parts we have covered so far. So next, so some of the important configuration files. Sitecore.json is a project configuration file, which is very specific to see content serialization. It is the project configuration file, which is more close to the developers. It has several sections and properties, including module.json path. You specify the generic path, right? And then you specify my module.json is 2 folders down. And you can find a file in this format, star.module.json. So what it does at runtime during serialization, goes and checks for such a file, what are path that are included there, it serializes those. If you miss a module.json here in the sitecore.json file, although the module.json might be there in your file system, it wouldn't be serialized. The paths in that file wouldn't be serialized, which is common sense, right? So it's two things. First, it's important to provide the path, module.json path in this sitecore.json file. And next thing is that file should be present in your file system, module.json, for serialization to occur. So then there's the user.json, which has which gets going with the non-interactive login, which stores the CM server details, access token, refresh tokens, which is a favorite topic in Sitecore and certification. I don't remember anything tested in XM Cloud certification. Then you have the star.module.json, holds details about Sitecore parts must be included in serialization along with scope and exclusion rules, right? So scope can have, the default for scope is item and descendants, which is nothing but current item and all the children, grandchildren, and all that, which is the default for scope. Item and children means current item and one level below. So that's item and children. So default is always item and descendants for scope when you specify the includes. And the mandatory properties path in case of includes. Then you totally have a separate JSON file, which is for client-side development, CSS config.json. The JSS config file that has Sitecore instance details like deployment secret, API key, instance path, among others. So this is not all related to serialization, but because this is a place for configuration files, I just added it here. Then you have the sitecore.config, which is like the patch file. So just stay awake in the exam, because one of the options beside sitecore.json could be sitecore.config, saying which one is the project configuration file. So that could be tricky. In Sitecore content serialization, item and descendants is default scope. In Sitecore content serialization, one level down scope is item and children, but item and descendants includes grandchildren too. You can exclude fields from serialization by specifying them in the sitecore.json config file and any star module.json file. So you can exclude fields from serialization by specifying them in two places, sitecore.json, star.modules.json, okay? If the path of a specific module file is not set in the sitecore.json file, the paths and related items included in the module, which when we say module, it means the module.json file, okay? It's implicit. Will not be serialized when you run a push or pull command. You can use the Sitecore SCR watch command to monitor changes to content items in a Sitecore instance and automatically serialize the changes to your file system, which is what we talked. A developer could have a Sitecore SCR watch running so that any changes to the Sitecore instance automatically get pulled to the file system. In case of rules section properties in module.json, path and scope are mandatory. Yeah. So that could be a question asking which is mandatory out of this list for rules section. So just be aware of that. In case of include section properties in module.json, name and path are mandatory. So that's a difference. The rule section has scope and path, but includes has name and path. And the default in case of include section is, if it's not specified, is item and descendants. Roles in XM Cloud, organization level. We talked about this organization admin, organization owner, which are one and the same. And then the organization user is there, who has to become an organization owner or admin if he has to create a project. In the content editor, you can set placeholder restrictions for your layout placeholders. These restrictions are applied on all pages in the site. Yeah. So you can set placeholder restrictions under Sitecore layout placeholders. So this gets applied all across the site, but not outside the site, I think. So that's something you need to be clear. So next competency is Sitecore APIs and webhooks. The small one just has 5 questions. This tests your capability of Edge API, GraphQL mutation, some GraphQL queries, then webhooks. Very simple one, 5 questions. So there are three different types of webhooks. One is the event handler, validation action, and the submit action. So I told about this initially. There could be play with words. Some of the option could say submit action. The other option could be submit event. So you should be very good with remembering these words also, like submit action is the correct option. So things like that. So when you look at each of these webhooks, if you look at the submit action, it gets triggered when a state has been reached. Like when you move from in review to approve, when you reach the approve, submit action gets fired. But validation action does a validation before the change. So some conditions are checked, and if those conditions fail, then it puts you back to the first state, which is the in review state, right? So the questions could be something like a reviewer is pushing changes from one state to another. He has not the user does not have balance of blah blah 10,000. So what happens? Obviously, validation action will be fired. So if he has reached that state, approved, and some intimation should go to a third-party system, that's part of your submit action, where a webhook will be called, a URL will be called, and that gets fired. Event handler is like any event handler. Webhook event handler is like when you click, it just gets fired irrespective of the state. So that's something we need to be aware of. So just have a basic idea of different APIs. The Edge API is one of them. So you need to always have a JWT token, and you can get the JWT token from in different ways from the organization client, which is part of your cloud deploy app. Yeah, so there are different ways to do that. Like if you want to get an Edge token, you can get it through a REST API or through the XM Cloud dashboard or Edge API key using the token API. So there are separate endpoint. Whenever we see the API, there will be a separate endpoint where we have to post and get the key. So there are so many ways to get the Edge token. You need the Edge token, obviously, to connect to the Edge APIs, which is nothing but your delivery APIs. So the delivery API is nothing but what connects to your experience Edge. It's very useful when you have to do some, your client application needs to obviously talk to the Edge, right, and get some data. So that's where this is really useful. Have an idea of the different endpoints. Edge.Sitecore cloud.io is for delivery API, token API. I don't remember anything really tested on what is this endpoint for, what is the URL and all that. But good to have an idea because we are doing the basics. And when we get on project, we can say, hey, go to this particular URL, which is delivery API. So it's useful that way. We are preparing for the long run rather than this short-term goal of certification, which is like, you do it, you probably will forget, but then you have to remember this in a long-term basis to apply it in projects. So there's a process to get access to the delivery API or the ID. ID is nothing but your playground, the GraphQL playground. So you have to create an Edge administration client. So Edge administration client is part of the XM Cloud portal. So you can create and get the client and secret, then pass those values. You get a token, then push that. Yeah, so this is an approach for delivery API where you need, the main point is you have to create an Edge administration client in this case because it's a delivery API. But in case of preview API, this API is nothing but which talks with your this side, like not on the client side, but the developer side. You can get this key, API key from your Sitecore instance under settings, and then you can use that other process all the same. But this time you'll access the preview API, which has the preview API has the same schema as your Edge API, but used for development purpose, and it sits mainly on the other side, totally diagonal, the opposite side compared to the developers, and then the other end is the user side. So this is the developer side. So one summary of all the things together, like you have a delivery API where you put the token value, you have the local rendering host, it connects to the delivery endpoint. That's what we talk. But if you use the preview endpoint, then you use the Sitecore key, which is the part of settings. And even then you can connect your local rendering host to your preview API endpoint. So local rendering host runs on your Docker in your local machine, but the actual rendering host is what gets deployed to your CDN provider, right? Like Netlify or Vercel. So that's why I had a terrible time initially to understand this slight change in terminology. Local adds totally different tone to rendering host, right? If you just say rendering host, it's what sits in the public. So yeah, that's something we need to be aware of and get used to. So there are different types of XMCloud deploy APIs. So you can access the environments. So this is useful when you have to use APIs for the REST APIs for deployment, and not the CLI. So this is the equivalent for the CLI commands. You have a deploy API, XMCloud deploy APIs. Then you have queries and mutations, which is again mutation is a favorite topic. Um, so there are crude operations possible with mutations where you can create item using a create item mutation. Mutation is like running a procedure. So that's apart from the querying capability of GraphQL, you can do some procedures using the mutation. So that's something you need to be aware of. So different examples of GraphQL queries, just as I said, just go through all those queries provided in the examples. And some of the important queries I have written here. The create item mutation looks like that. You just need to be aware that there is something like create item. And if there is something like, what do you say, new item, then you should be aware there is nothing like that. Like that's why it's better to go through the mutation list, create item, that's an update item. So go through that and be good with this terms, so that you don't get misguided by wrong options in the exam. So query layout, if you see that first one, it has the first 10, so that this is all from the examples, so they don't ask anything out of these examples. It's the documentation. So these two are get the root item of a site. Although it has layout, it gets the root item of a site. That's really, it uses the layout query, but it gets the root item of a site. So be careful about that. Then query site gets all sites, site paths and pages. So because you have the clues, you have the all, and then you have end cursor, right? So it's a big list. That's how I kept it in mind. So other things are just be aware of the different queries and then go to the URL or the documentation, check all the queries. Important points. From the deployment log, you can also cancel a running deployment, rerun a failed deployment, promote the deployment to another environment, download logs, or open the XMCloud dashboard. Yeah, this is a point about XMCloud deployment, right? You have logs, and in the log, all the things like starting from provisioning, build, deploy, everything is logged, like post-build actions. If a user is a member of several roles and one of those roles is specifically denied an access right to an item, the user is denied the access right. So this specifically for denying an item access. If source code repositories other than GitHub use XMCloud CLI for deployment, or REST also, so you can use REST APIs. Create item GraphQL mutation is used to create Sitecore items. Then using this GraphQL ID requires that you are at least in the Sitecore/Sitecore client users role. So that's very important. Like you might be a developer, you want to access the GraphQL ID, you need to be part of this particular role. And in admin API, there is something called as clear cache for tenant, which clears the cache of the tenant, experience edge tenant. So that's something to be aware of, and go through the list of all the admin APIs endpoints. So rendering variant is used to display the data structure in different ways. Authoring and management API provide a single endpoint and schema that allows you to manage your content using GraphQL. Sitecore data exchange framework is designed to facilitate data transfer between Sitecore and third-party systems. The next competency is Sitecore pages, which is nothing but the XMCloud pages. It covers how to create, edit items, modify components, and all these areas. So just a overview of different URLs. For portal, you have the URL. Pages, you have a different URL. Deploy, XM Cloud deploy app, you have a separate URL. XM Cloud portal is again a separate URL. So this is another look like how publishing happens, because both are a separate entity, Experience Edge, and then you have a content management instance. It just does a calculation, puts everything together and then pushes it. And it also does a check from the Experience Edge environment to the CM environment to find missing items, then deletes those items. It doesn't archive, it just deletes those items completely to maintain a proper copy. So there are different publishing tools: Pages, Explorer, Content Editor, Experience Editor. The Explorer is a new tool where you can search items, and then you can do things like what's mentioned, what are the features are mentioned that's there. So again, the publishing, we talked about this. So there's a manifest that gets created, which collates all the items that need to be published, and then it is sent as one shot. So this is like a job start. All entities are published which are part of the manifest, and the job ends. So this is what happens between the Experience Edge connector and Experience Edge. So one more time, publishing pipeline: calculating additional entities to publish, calculating dependencies, resolving dependencies, deleting old or expired content. So because it goes to the Experience Edge, finds what is there, what is not here, and then goes and deletes that in the Experience Edge. The other thing is dynamic placeholders. Configure renderings to use dynamic placeholders. The dynamic placeholder rendering parameter template must inherit from iDynamic placeholder. Then your placeholder key in settings should look like my rigid rendering hyphen flower bracket star. In the renderings, expose the placeholder setting as part of layout service. The third one, set the placeholder key as defined into like my rendering hyphen star. So most important part is rendering is defined in placeholder key, and then it's used in the rendering TSX file. So the definition happens at an early stage, and that is more like a linking between the placeholder item and the rendering. So rendering item. So that's something important. So XM Cloud components, most important feature of XM Cloud component is this. It is a no-code tool, but the most important thing is it can connect out of the box to so many providers. You can see ChatGPT, Content Hub One. If you have to write code in our headless, we have to write code for each of these data providers. But this comes out of the box, like you just connect it and it starts working. So that's where component builder adds capability compared to our current headless components, which is JSS based and things like that. So again, one more look at component and versions. Like component builder has this concept of component where you define your design, but then you can create versions. So the version is for different devices or which have different screen width. You can specify from this breakpoint to this breakpoint, which is like a device, it should behave like this. On the next breakpoint, set of breakpoints, it should behave like this because the screen width is changing, right? So it's a different version. So this is good to be aware of. Although component builder is in early access stage, it's good to be aware that component and versions are the terms here. It's not called as variant. A variant is more like a component, and variant is more of XXA terminology. But component builder has this component and versions terminology, which is nothing but different layouts for different breakpoints. So different staging. When you stage a component in component builder, it is ready in, it's available in pages, Sitecore pages. I'm talking about the inbuilt components, which are the no-code components. You stage it there in component builder. It's available in pages to drag and drop and use. Okay, so they have different stages. But then if you publish it, it goes to the rendering host completely. So that's something to be aware of. Yeah. Publishing goes to the experience side. So these are, but just be aware of different stages, and there's not much tested about these in the exam. And then this is a high-level overview of how components and page work together, with more about data templates. FEAS as a service, you expose. There's a place where you expose certain data templates, and those templates can be used in component builder. And yeah, component builder is the XM Cloud component builder, and then those fields can be dynamically mapped in the component, and then they are available in the pages. When you drag and drop, this component already has a mapping. You specify the data source from the XM Cloud instance, and the data is available in the pages, which is not which is our XM Cloud pages. So in pages, you can also configure devices. You need to specify the following fields. You need to specify the device width, visibility, and the icon for the page for the device. So the device are nothing but how in pages you can see how your page looks, design looks for different devices, and then you can define, for that you can define your own device. So then you need to define these: device width, visibility, and icon. Well, next one is Sitecore security for developers. So this is very similar to our Sitecore 10. So you need to be aware of roles. Roles should be access rights should be assigned to roles rather than individual users, because revoking them is very easy. Yeah, so access right settings. So just be aware of that. Then the different tools, you have the user manager, role manager, domain manager, access viewer, security editor. Content editor has a security tab. In this, most important part is access viewer is mostly read only, and it gives you an explanation of current settings, right? And security editor is used when you want to edit users or roles permissions. So you can toggle the user or role even in access viewer, but it's read only. And if you want to have a quick explanation of a particular item, then it's easy in the access viewer. But the editor, security editor, as the name goes, you assign access and all that. And if you go to the security tab, it change the ownership of an item. That's something that's something which you need to be clear. The last one is data modeling. It's all about templates, insert options. So if two if a field is present in a base template and is also present in child template, what happens? That's something you need to be clear. Yeah, it is duplicated mainly in case of inheritance. When you create it in an existing template, it will throw an error. But if it is part of a base template, it creates as a duplicate field. Then adding a language version to an SXA site, there is a script called add site language, which duplicates. You can select a source and a target language, and it just duplicates those fields. And then when you go to a content editor, you have this new language for all the items. You can select that language and add your content. So again, we talked about clear cache, which is an admin API to clear cache, and you also have API endpoints for settings, webhooks, and all that. And the base URL is specified here. So basic concepts: insert options. What is the use of insert options? We all know that as it is always set in the template. What is the use of $name? We know that. Standard values, placeholder restrictions. We know specifying source. For why do you specify a source for a multi-list? What do they use? Obviously to get the data right for the multi-list. So data source location. You need to have an idea why you specify data source location, because the content editor will be shown that part of the tree. Yeah, there's a deployment log which shows you progress status of your XM Cloud deployment, and you can restart a deployment from where it left and things like that. It's a very good option for deploy log. You have SP scripts for site collection folder, and all that. So final tips: thorough all question and answer e-learning study guide. Do it 10 times, and all 10 times get 10 out of 10. Overview of GraphQL query examples from the documentation, GraphQL mutations, overview of API endpoint. Other things is going through all the URLs, but that's part of the study guide. So that's all. The exam is more like starting for us. And then when we go to real world, we are equipped with the terminologies, and we know what is where, right? Which is very important. So this is a beginning actually. I wish you all the best for the exam, and hope you do well. Good luck. Thank you.